Hi, everybody. I am Jennifer Ackerman, and I'm going to talk to you today about some beginning underwater photography. So, key components, things that are important for your underwater photography are going to be covered today. The good and the bad about the TG. I know it's a very popular camera. I can agree and disagree about that. The modes and menus and options you need to know about the TG that are important if you're using it. Understanding the core image details. So we are going to get a little photography nerdish and talk about some key photography components that you really need to know, whether you're a beginner or going to take it into the advanced level. Lighting options, bad images, why you get them and how to avoid them. Comparing modes and lighting methods, basic composition, which is any camera you're using or any photo you're taking. Equipment maintenance and workflow, and 3 things that are great to know about Lightroom. Okay. So a little bit about me. Some people know me as Belger Photography. That's because I've been a topside photographer for 30 years. Was married 30 years ago to a man with the last name of Belger. The business lasted longer than the marriage did. So, but I got stuck with the last name and the business name. So that's why all of my photos have a Belger Photography logo on them. I've been certified for about 20 years. I got my DM 4 years ago. I started writing articles for Dive Newswire, which is where Scuba Chick came along. Some weird people online were kind of following me and sending me weird messages, so I didn't want to use my real name. So that's how that alias was born. And then I upgraded from a little point and shoot, similar to the TG, about 3 years ago, and got my big rig going, which is my baby. And then my boys who are here today joined me underwater as certified divers a couple years ago, which amped up my diving. And then this year I started with the workshops and presentations, and hopefully we'll be leading some dive trips with that are centered around photography soon. Okay, so aside from the camera, the compact kit can range from just a camera, starting at about $500 for the TG, all the way up to complete kits. They're going to range from $1,400 to $3,400. So you can get really into this in an expensive way. The camera, the housing, a tray, all these things we're gonna talk about. All right, and let me go ahead and hide the side view so we can see a full screen here. There we go. Okay. These are some of the kits that Backscatter sells. That's where I personally purchase all of my equipment from. They are a great source of knowledge. They won't steer you wrong. This is their current sales and things for the TG different kits. Some of them are video. Some of them are just minimalist. Some of them are going to go all the way up. Here's your $3,500 package. So it can get as deep as you want it to go for just a basic compact camera. So why the Olympus? What is the big rigmarole that's so popular about this camera? It's beginner level. It's got 12 megapixels, which is decent for, you know, posting online and on social media. 3-inch screen makes it easy to see, and you can shoot RAW, which is very important, and we'll get into the reasons for that in a little bit. The presets you basically say, I'm underwater and I'm shooting little things, and you turn it to that knob and it will give you some presets rather than making you adjust all of those very technical issues. It's very compact, very little you can put it in your carry-on, throw it in your backpack. It's tough. It's going to be not as fragile and baby kit gloves that you need to handle some of these cameras with. And it's very good for macro. I cannot dispute that at all. It does very good macro work that rivals some of the stuff that I do on my big rig. So now, why not the Olympus? There's some places online that tout this camera. You've got to have this. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm not really that sold on it for these reasons. There's no manual mode. So once you get past the beginner level, you really are stuck there. You can't grow with it. You can't control things that you need to control to get creative with your images. The generic packaged modes, yes. and sometimes they guess wrong. And so that's why there's a lot of variation with the results that you get from these pictures being grainy and blurry and super bright and then super dark. So when you give the control to the camera, you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. The defaults will overexpose most of your images. So you will have to manually go in and say, no, I want to compensate this by a couple stops. You have to get technical to get the results that you want for a lot of these. Changing the modes back and forth will erase those custom adjustments that you put in there. So if you say, I want to shoot in RAW, and then you go over to program mode and then you go back, it's going to just shoot in JPEG. So you have to re-put in all those things. So those kind of controls that you give over to the camera kind of outsmart you sometimes. Not all the adjustments are available in the different modes. So if you go to underwater, you're not going to be able to adjust your ISO to where you want it to be. Some things you may want to have. The sub modes, underwater has 5 different options. In between those, picture modes have 25. So as you're scrolling, you just have this endless sea of, oh, do I want to do that mode or this mode, but you don't know what they're really doing. You don't know the changes that they're making to your pictures, and you can't understand them. And it's not going to prepare you to upgrade. So if you see yourself really shooting underwater and wanting to get good images, this is not going to be, you're going to have to learn everything again when you step up for your cameras. Download and read the manual. So let's see if we can get this off the screen there. The first thing, number one, it does not come from the factory with a manual. You have to go online, just as you do with so many things these days, and download the manual. But it is important, and you will never get the value out of the camera or its functions if you don't devote some time to it, like anything else in life. So, things to know, the menu and the submenus. You're going to go into these to set your date and your time zone, all those basic things, but there's so much more in the menu. This one we're going to talk a lot about, that little wrench down there, and the settings. These are going to be where you control what you can control with this camera. The shooting modes and sub-modes. So that's where you get into your underwater presets and how it's going to try to correct those blue tones that you get when you go underwater. This is going to be the screen that comes up when you're underwater to allow you the 5 different sub-menus to get into the different presets that tweak all of those settings for you. The key settings. So these are going to be how to format your SD card, which you should do in any camera that you're shooting. Don't just get an SD card out from the package and put it in your camera. Format it to that camera. That camera is going to communicate with the card, and it's going to transfer your images and capture your images to where when you transfer it over to your computer later, it's going to actually not give you an error. So formatting a card, both in the beginning, when you first get that card, and then when you want to erase your images. Don't just delete your images off from the camera or the computer. Go ahead and do a reformat to the SD. That gives it a fresh start. It doesn't accumulate all that junk and the files that you get, and with a lot of computer problems when they're corrupt. So you won't get corruption if you format in the camera. Image review is so important. After you take your image, there is an option to see a 2-second, 1 second, whatever you want to set it on review. So it'll pop up on your screen and say, oh, it's black. I don't want to take 5,000 images of a black picture. I'm going to have to change something. And then you can figure out what the problem is. So reviewing that image immediately after you take it and having it show up on your screen, so crucial. Always shoot in RAW, even if you don't know what it is. So as you progress, all over these years, I've had little cameras, big cameras. If I didn't save in RAW, some of these images that I thought were trash and junk, but were in Egypt that I can never recreate, I would just throw them away. Oh, I can't see that. If you shoot in RAW, you've got all the raw information that you can maybe salvage those pictures later when you have the information, or somebody that knows how to do it in Lightroom can fix it for you. Oh, I got this amazing picture, but it didn't come out. Don't be so sure. We're going to go into that too. Okay, does anybody know what RAW is? So all of these presets, it's going to bring the contrast down. It's going to bring the brightness over to here. It's going to bring your color saturation, all these different technical things. RAW records it all. Every single option that you could select on this camera, it's gonna have all that information so that you can pick and choose later if you mess it up. So just like fix it later in Photoshop, if you shoot RAW, you can. If you don't shoot RAW, it's gonna bake those instructions that the camera puts in on your image, and it's gonna say, this is what you got. You can't fix your brightness, you can't fix your color. Color is the biggest thing you worry about after you shoot the pictures. You can fix that 9 cases out of 10. And we'll go into that. I could talk all day long about this camera nerd stuff, so I've got to keep myself on the 45-minute here. Set your ISO and your shutter speed value limits. If you're shooting with presets, this camera can shoot up to 12,000 ISO. Now, from people like me back in the film days, 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, oh my gosh. This thing can shoot 12,000 something, ISO. You don't want it to shoot that. You'll get your image and you can take it in a pitch dark room, but you're gonna get a crap grainy image that you will not be able to use. And we'll go into that. Practice topside in the housing. Don't wait until your trip, and don't just play with your camera outside of the housing, because many times those buttons have no correlation on the housing as they do on the camera. So if your little turn wheel is up here on the top, sometimes in those housing it's over on the left on the bottom. So you need to practice topside in the housing. Understanding your expanded playback. We're gonna get a little nerdy, but I promise it's not gonna last forever. So when you take an image and you press review, and then you press your info 2 more times, you're gonna get all this information. Nobody knows what it is in the beginning, but knowing what this is telling you, it's gonna tell you what to change if you're getting overexposed pictures, underexposed pictures, blurry pictures. And we're gonna go into each of them briefly, individually. This is your shooting mode. So up at the top with that turn button, that's gonna tell you we're an underwater microscope. We're gonna shoot little teeny things that are underwater. This is your shutter speed. Even though it's not 50, it's actually 1/50th of a second. But this is gonna tell you how long that shutter is gonna be open and recording your image. This is your aperture. So this is how big that aperture opens and how much light it lets in. This one, it shows your metering mode. So right now it's taking into account the entire picture. The lighting that's backlit over here with the sun, and also the critter in the cave. So it's going to give you a medium result. If you select your spot metering, it's going to only take into account what's lit up in the center of your image. So if you're trying to go for that critter in the cave, you only really want to worry about his exposure, not the sun in the background and all the other things that aren't important in your picture. Exposure compensation. This is where you tell it, you know what? You're giving me a really bright picture and I don't like it. I'm going to force you to take it down 2 stops and make this image darker. So you do have some control in these pictures. This is your focal length. With compact cameras, it has nothing to do with 35mm cameras. So an 8.4mm, kind of like a 35mm, somewhere around there. It's not what we're used to seeing with, oh, this is a 100mm lens, this is a 240. This is much different with a compact camera. White balance, this is where the blues and the color adjustments are. They do have some presets. You can customize them, or you can just forget about it while you're shooting, open it up later in post and fix it perfectly, which is what I do. I don't worry one thing about white balance while I'm shooting, fix it later. Okay, these very technical, your white balance compositions, your amber blues and your green magentas. You can mess with that, but basically we're not going to worry about that on the screen. ISO value, here's your film speed in the old days. This is very scary. This image, I don't even know how it came out, but if you zoom in, it's going to be super grainy. You want to pay attention to where your camera is guessing your ISO should be. Color space, not going to worry about that. It's always going to be that. Underwater is your picture mode past your mode dial.
Come on.
Your pixels, this one's going to be set. This is at your maximum pixel count, so you're not going to adjust that. You want to just make sure that it's at the top. Compression rating, that's how much of the image information it is recording. So right now we're only getting 1/8 being in this program mode. You're throwing away 7/8 of all of your options by not shooting in RAW here. 4/3, that's just your aspect ratio for being on the screen. Image quality, this is large. With this camera there, you want to make sure that it shows up RAW though. So this was not shot in RAW. You want, if you are using your JPEGs to just do a quick share, you want to make sure that that's in large. This is just your file numbering and your image number. So that's as nerdy as we're going to get with the camera settings and just how to understand. We're not even going to touch histograms because it took me years to understand histograms. So we're not going to go into that here. All right, now for the outside of the camera, we understood some basics of internal camera gears. Now for the outside, we've got our housing, the tray, the ball arms or flex arms. This is a flex arm, this is a ball arm. And these are required if you're going to use any lighting, because this little thing on the front is where you put your sync cord, which tells the flash it's time to fire. So you're going to have this to be able to connect that. You're also going to have your tray to connect the arms for your lights. The tray, like I said, attach your connection points and the ball arms. Okay, always, if you take anything away from this talk, always put your name and your phone number or your email address somewhere inside of the camera, which is going to hopefully be waterproof and stay waterproof. I have waterproof stickers that I get from Mabel's Labels in Canada, and I put them on everything. My batteries, my ball arms, SD cards, everything, put your name in it. Because people if you're on a liveaboard, they're all going to have similar equipment. They're all going, oh, is this my charger cord? Is this and they're going to take your stuff and it's going to disappear. But if you got your name on it, or you use a paint pen, something just to say, this is my stuff. Because so much, especially with the TG, is going to look just like everybody else's. Okay, camera buoyancy. Sometimes you'll see these cubes and cones on here. When you start adding lights and batteries, it's heavy. And so you do not want to add weights in your pockets and then have a camera that you're handing off sometimes, or sometimes you don't have it, sometimes you do, and all of a sudden your buoyancy changes. You pop to the top, you sink to the bottom. You can't have that steady camera angle because you've got a heavy camera. So these will negatively impact the weight of your rig. And sometimes with my wide angle, I actually add weight to the camera because all the air in that dome is going to make it float a little. So you want it to let it go in the water and it's going to stay right there, or maybe be a little negatively buoyant. So when you're planning your dive, what are you going to take with you? Which pieces? Well, what are you going to be shooting? Do you like big creatures or small? So wide angle or macro? What's the visibility? If you're shooting after a storm and there's a ton of particulate in the water, you're not going to be able to shoot wide and get a good image. So you might as well just focus on the macro stuff, because everything else is going to be just a grainy mess. Morning, day, dusk, or night. Night dives. Well, you're going to have lights. So you're going to have to, put your kit with a light so you can focus on things, because you've got no other way to focus. Setting up your camera. Format your SD card. We went over that. Fresh batteries. Oh my goodness. How many times have I gone on a dive and gotten 3 shots and then battery blinking? No! Make sure that they are fresh and that you have a spare set. Because a lot of times with repetitive dives, you don't have time to charge your batteries in between. Clean the lens before you put it in the housing, especially if you're shooting macro. Because so many times if you're shooting super up macro, it's going to focus on that little piece of dust on your camera lens that you cannot open up and clean off until after that dive. Please clean your lens before you put it in there. Dunk it in fresh water to test before the dive for your waterproofing. If it floods in the fresh water, it's a lot better than flooding with salt water. The corrosion from the salt water is not going to be friendly. And take a test shot before you get in the water. I have, in the flower gardens, did my big giant stride off the side of there. They're lowering down my camera, and Andy says, "You want me to lower this down? It's got the lens cap on."
Oh, no.
No, that's okay. I'm going to go solo on this one. Now, with a compact camera, you're not going to get that issue, but take a test shot. Make sure that you don't have a cut in your fiber optic cord to where it's not going to fire. And then your whole dive, you're just carting around this extra weight that's messing up your buoyancy. So let's get in the water and take some pictures. All right, what is the camera's job? Above and beyond anything, it is to give you an image that's recorded, that's exposed. It doesn't matter about anything else. It's just going to give you a properly exposed. Now, if you shoot with strobes, the camera will compensate without strobes. It will compensate with a slow shutter and high ISO. We'll get into that. The more automatic guessing control you give to the camera, the more generic and neutral results it's going to give you for the exposure. So right here, slow shutter speed. What happens here? The water's moving. If you're in Cozumel and you're on a drift dive and there's currents, this is going to happen if your 1/30th of a second exposure, which is how long that shutter is open. All this movement is going on. And if you're kicking to get to that critter and you're shooting at the same time, that's even more shake. So we need a faster shutter speed to prevent this shake. This is an image that you're not going to be able to bring back even in Lightroom later. And you can see the ISO is great. This is fine. All of these things are fine. Aperture's good. It's your shutter speed there that's killing you. And when you zoom in, it makes it even worse. So try not to zoom in. Use your fins to zoom, not your lens. How to fix shake. So set that shutter speed, and this is how you would do it in a TG. I thought more people would have a TG here. So you go into the ISO, upper limit, lower limit, auto, you bring this down. You don't want it to be too high, but you still want to record an image. So no lower than 1/80th of a second. And that's how you would set it in the TG. A lot of compact cameras are similar, and they're going to be similar results there. Now, you can't always do this in every mode. Some of the modes are going to be, we're not going to give you that control. You're too stupid. We're going to pick that for you. So this isn't available in every mode. And what it's going to do to make up for that shift in speed is it's going to bump your ISO. So what happens with a high ISO? Right here, your shutter speed's great. 1/200th of a second, super fast. F-stop good, your ISO 640. Oh, that's above 400. Oh, here, this one, same succession of pictures, 800. Getting a little worse, 1250. How's that image looking? And here, 1600. This is just trash. So, what can you do to avoid? And if you zoom in on the eye here, this hammerhead, this is your image. It's no good. I mean, yeah, I was there, I got the image, I proved it, I saw a hammerhead, but that's about all it's good for. This is the setting that you would use to limit your shutter speed. You go into the toolbox, ISO, upper limit, and you bring that down. Below 500 is ideal, 400 is where I like to set it. So that's where you're going to control how much control you give your camera. How to fix the grain and the shake. The only true way is to use external lights because it's working with your ambient light, your available light. Bring some light with you, all your problems go away. You can use some really good flashlights. I use Orca Torch. They have a whole line of anything you could need. Or the backscatter, they have great strobes. So they're about similar in size. They're going to give you really good results, and they're going to push up that ISO. and the shutter speed. But they're expensive and hard. Do I really need them? Let's go into and compare what happens if you're shooting with your available light, a flashlight, or a strobe, and see if it really does matter. So here we've got all your geeky information from your available light picture. We're at 1/6 of a second. That is super long. You can hear it open and close. You don't think that a 1/6 of a second is oh, that's so fast. In camera, no, it's not. So you're going to get shake and blur from that because it's open for so long. Any movement is going to be recorded on here. Now this was not in the water. This was, on my table, and I was holding still and I was right beside it. So this is just for the information, not for the actual image. My ISO speed here with ambient, 1600. No good. You're going to have grain. And it's underexposed. It's too dark to be a good image. Over here with a flashlight, this is a 2000 lumen flashlight. Spotlighted on this creature, which is about that big, from about this distance. And you can see much better, 1/160th of a second, f5 for your aperture, 200 ISO, great results. And with a strobe, you're going to get very similar results. So in this case, above water, this worked out great. So, big difference with lighting. Let's compare it that was in the underwater mode. Aperture mode is going to be very similar. You've got an underexposed image. Now, in this mode, you see how the same lighting, the same creature, the same distance is giving you completely different overexposed results in a different mode. So you have to kind of go through the modes, figure out based on what you're shooting, what you like, and then, maybe bump that exposure up. So there's a lot of tweaks to get a great image that you're gonna have to learn and make if you want a good shot. So no lights, and you wanna shoot underwater. What should I do? I don't wanna invest in it yet. I just wanna take a camera with me on a dive. So HDR, this is what my son shot in Bonaire. You go over to the drop-down menus, and you go over to HDR. It's going to take a succession of 3 images, and this is common on a lot of cameras, all the way up to mirrorless. It'll take 3, an underexposed, what it thinks is properly exposed, and an overexposed. It's going to combine the 3 images, and it's going to bring out the shadows. It's going to boost up the highlights. So you're going to get a really good image but it's going to take the camera longer to record these images and to process them. So you're going to be held up. If you got something that's going by quick, you're only going to get 1 or 2 shots. This one, my son took, this is what's in the camera, no lights whatsoever. We were kind of shallow, but great speed, great ISO. When I took it into Lightroom later, color corrected, you got a decent image with no lights, no more investment. Same thing here with an octopus he took. Let's see. The puffer, and then with some color correction in Lightroom, came out to be a great image. Okay, even with a wide angle, you get some good image results with that HDR in there. Now, when you're using lights, we all know backscatter. Like snow, when you're driving with your high beams on, you're gonna light up all this particulate sand. If your buddy went by with his fins and kicked it all up, this is what you're gonna get when you light up a scene when there's backscatter. You can fix it later in Lightroom, dot by dot, very tedious. You don't wanna do that. So how do we avoid backscatter? Well, if you're shooting macro, which is a foot or less in front of you, you can spotlight your light from above the creature, only lighting up right at it. So all of the light in front of your lens is not going to be shown up with the backscatter. And you could use flood in front. So you're not lighting up a whole lot if you're 12 inches or less. Bless you. Now with a powerful flashlight, you can do this, or a video light, 2000 lumens. That's what you want to use, a single one with the macro, or strobes and a sync cord. Larger subjects from further away, you're probably going to need 2 lights, because anything that's more than an arm length away, you're probably not going to light up with the strobes that you have. And those will be positioned above and behind your lens. Okay, Cone of light, the edge of light. So when you're shining light on a subject, you don't want to shine it directly at your subject. You want just the edge of that light. So if I'm here with the camera in front, I'm only lighting up all this water over here and all those particulates. Everything from me to the subject is going to be dark. So I'm not lighting up all the sand that's from me to here. I'm only lighting it up right there, and it's going to be a lot clearer image. So, natural light, when you don't want to use the strobes. The best results are going to be in shallow water, of course, not in deep water. You're going to lose all your colors and things there. Clear water, so the visibility is a big thing to consider when you're shooting with just natural light. You want the sun to be behind you. So, as you'll notice, the sun is not right here coming into the scene. It's right here lighting up this side of the ship. So you've got your illumination and you've got your strobe, which is the sun, lighting up that image right there. You want to use the sun as your friend for lighting up what you want to use. So we already discussed, if you can't reach it, you're not going to light it up with lights. Just turn them off. Even if you have lights and you're shooting a wreck or a big scene away, just turn them off because you're only going to light up the sand. And that's when a nice silhouette or black and white picture can save an otherwise, well, he's not lit up. I can't see his face. What good is it? You can turn it into a kind of artsy picture by silhouetting, or black and white is a lot of times when you cannot restore the color out of that blue image, turn it black and white. Little secret there. So, lighting summary. If you got no lights, shallow, sunny, good visibility, sun behind you, lighting up the scene, underwater mode is going to be the HDR picture mode. Custom white balance or underwater preset. Hold still when you're shooting. Don't be moving. Hold your breath. Especially if you're in front of that little teeny creature, hold your breath. Don't hold your breath, but hold your breath. Blow out a couple bubbles. Don't be breathing a ton. Do not zoom in and record in RAW. Flashlights. If you got flashlights or video lights, which are continuous lights, you can do macro and super macro only. You're not going to do anything with this in a wide setting. Shoot in aperture priority or underwater mode. White balance is auto. You want to bump your exposure as needed. ISO is going to be auto with that limit. Flash is off on your settings. Exposure meter spot, and shoot and roll. Now, the best option is the strobes. And you would set this in the TG, which is what this talk is centered about. This is how you set your settings on the TG to shoot with the backscatter strobe. You have to actually go in and set your manual value down to the minimum so you don't exhaust your battery. It's going to still tell your fiber optic cable, hey, it's time to fire, but you're not going to have that recycle time for your flash, and you're going to conserve your battery. From there, you pick the RC, which is remote control, and it is going to communicate with that strobe and let it know the amount of light. So you do not have to change your power level on your strobe. You just need to set it to the smart control or the smart control macro. And you need to attach that fiber optic cable, which goes from your camera strobe to this strobe and says, time to fire. Macro or small fish and turtles, 2 lights for a little bit larger. Shoot and raw, -2 exposure compensation, because a lot of times that camera is going to guess, I want to make you a bright picture, here you go. Too bright most of the time. White balance is flash, ISO, limit of 400, and spot metering. Okay, so if we've got time, we do have a few minutes. We're going to go into some just general photography composition basics. This is good for any camera you're shooting, GoPro, whatever. All right, to make a pleasing picture, the rule of thirds, I like to call it tic-tac-toe. You got an image, and if you imagine, and a lot of these screens will give you a rule of thirds grid, is what they call it, put your subject in one of those lines, or ideally add a crosshair. So I've got his eyeball, I've got him, I've got my secondary subject of the coral there in the other crosshair. It's a nice composition. Remember not to dismember the little creatures. We don't want to cut off his nose. We don't want to cut off his flippers. And certainly with that frogfish, that was such a good picture. But because I had on a 100mm macro lens, that was you shoot the eyeball of a whale shark when you're shooting macro on the camera like mine. So that was as far out as I could get from him. But it's a trash picture. I didn't post it.
I like it. He's beautiful.
Thank you. He was
He's
pretty.
beautiful.
I had to prove it. Give your subject some room to breathe or swim. This is a great image. I love it. But I'm uncomfortable viewing it because he's so crowded. I feel claustrophobic for him. It gives me anxiety. This little guy, oh my gosh, you're stuck in this little fishbowl. No, we need to give you some room. This is much better. He has some space. He can move around. This guy's got some room to crawl in front of him. That's a much more pleasing image than the other ones in the beginning. Now your perspective. This is how we dive, right? We got a great profile. Our fins are not down. We're in the horizontal position. And this is what we see. But it's not what you should shoot. That's nice. I saw him. He was in Egypt. That's great. But if you shoot up, you get a whole different perspective of I just went past him. He was a really good guy. I want to go back. Yeah. If you're on eye level with your critter, or if you're looking up at them, much, much better than when you're looking down at something. So keep that in mind as you're composing your shot. Get close and then get closer. You'll hear this all the time. So what I was doing right here was I was saying, okay, I need to get my adjustments ready. I need to be ready for this turtle who's coming in. I took a test shot. I noticed I needed to make some adjustments. So while he was on his approach, maybe he goes by and I miss him. But I was getting ready. This guy's taking pictures. They're looking. I waited until he was right here. You see where that guy is from right there? That much closer. And I got the shot. Yeah, he actually bumped my dome port. Framing, so great. A lot of these critters hide in places. They like to be in crevices. They like to be in holes. These make for great framing. So, I mean, he's in his nice little dark, there's contrast. They lend themselves to be framed in these little holes that they live in. Diagonals. I love diagonals. So when you got things sprawling out from side to side, up and down, his arms, these fish, the salt pier, it's those type of lines rather than just something's filling up your whole frame. This is going to make the difference between a good picture and a great picture. No fish butts, please. Yeah, we saw the fish, but you don't see their eyes. You don't get that connection. This is so much more striking than just getting a fish on his way away from you because you scared him off and you're chasing him. He's like, get away. Don't record those fish butts. Contrast. When you can separate your subject from the background by either using spotlights, snoots, just the color of the creature, or on a night dive, you're going to get striking images that bring those subjects out and that highlight those subjects, not just the sand that they're swimming on top of and get lost in and are camouflaged with. Be patient and be ready. Adjust your strokes and your settings. If you've got something coming in, wait for it. Be patient. If you see a turtle on his way up to the surface, don't chase him to the surface. You know he's just going up for air. He's going to come back down and be eating on that grass again. Go down to the grass patch he was just at and wait for him to come to you. That's going to be what you need to do rather than chasing creatures. And they're going to be a lot more approaching you rather than you chasing them off. When you're there, you shoot and review. Make a couple adjustments. Take 2 or 3 shots. If you're on a dive trip with other people, look around. Oh, there's somebody else waiting for a picture. Okay, I'll take 2 or 3. Go to the back of the line. Look at your pictures. Oh, this one was blurry. This one was dark. I'm going to make these changes while he's taking his shots. And then you just wait your turn. Go back up when everybody else is done or you're next in line. Take a few more shots until you get the right one. Now, if you found the creature, that's a different story. Then you kind of own it and you can sit there with it all day long. After the dive, you want to rinse it just like when the guy was talking about earlier with your equipment. You want to get that salt water off. You don't need to leave it and soak it for hours. Just go over there, give it a little washboard, that'll get as much as you need to get off the salt water from the buttons. Take out your SD card, transfer the images. You never know when your camera will flood. It's not if, it is when. And if you've been on this unforgettable trip and you got all these images from a week and then your camera floods at the end of the week, you just lost all your images. Back them up every single, if not every dive, at least every time your battery dies and you got to open it up anyway for your battery, take out that SD card, record the images onto an external hard drive, and then replace it, or have a spare SD card that you can use back and forth. Check your batteries and then put your SD card back in. Do not forget that. Maintenance on this equipment. You cannot just take your shots, put it away. Just like with any scuba equipment, you're going to have to look at the seals, the O-rings. You're going to have to lube them, if not after every dive or every day, after every trip, please. There are some people that go, even with your GoPros, that little seal on your underwater housing, it will crack and corrode if you don't lube it. It's not going to keep it from being waterproof. It's just going to keep it from deteriorating. The thing that is your worst enemy with seals and the times that I have flooded, I have hair, long hair, and one hair got in my big rig. Didn't see it. I was just changing everything out. You kind of get complacent when you know this and you do it like the back of your hand, put it together, went on a dive. My housing has a light. And when it starts releasing the pressure that you pump it out with the hose, it will start blinking at you before it floods. The pressure is being released. I saw that thing turn yellow and I was like, I'm going up, handed off my camera, finished my dive, went back up and looked. One single hair from the inside to the outside was enough to let air in at the beginning, or well, air in the outside, but we'll let water in. So always check for hair. It's not sand. You can have a ton of sand on there. It's going to compress inside of that O-ring and it's going to seal. A hair will not. So always look for those hairs. Editing in Lightroom. This is where you fix it. There are a ton of applications. There's Dive Plus, they do generic things. Lightroom is what I use. It gives you the most flexibility. When you shoot raw, you have so much. So this image here, too much light. Do we even know what the subject is in this picture?
Right.
No. Carpet shot. Nope. But if we do a few little tweaks and crop in, yeah. So originally you would think this is trash. Just throw it away, move on to the next picture. Maybe I got a better one. Don't be so sure. With shooting in RAW and going in Lightroom, sometimes you can get that whale shark that you got one shot of that it's not always lost. So auto apply settings. This little button is one of the ones that is your best friend in Lightroom. You go in here, you hit auto, it'll adjust what it thinks, and you can always tweak it. Your exposure, your contrast, your highlights, your shadows, your whites. It's going to say, this is what AI thinks this image should look. And then if you don't like it, if you think it's too bright, too dark, whatever, you can go in and fix those up. This is where your presets and your camera are making all these decisions for you. And this is just one screen of the many in this program that you have control over. Once you do that, here's your color correction. This little light dropper tool. You click on it, you find something neutral. So sand is a great neutral thing in the water. You're not going to have a white card on every shot. Sometimes you would think that this clownfish is white stripe is white, but it's not always white. You just think it is underwater. Sand is your best tool. A Steel 80, great. Any cylinder is going to be that neutral gray. You can touch on your buddy's, if he's in the picture, touch on his tank. It's going to give you a nice white balance reference to bring these colors down. Then you want to export that image and share it. So special thanks to my buddy Wayne who lent me his TG to play with in Bonaire. He has this great company for Trident Warriors. They will train veterans free of charge. And we go on dive trips. I went to Egypt, Danny Gove, that's where I met Danny, and Lori was a couple years ago in Egypt. Great, great outfit there. And thanks to my son Mike, who took a lot of these images on the trip in Bonaire a couple of weeks ago. He gave me his honest opinion on what settings, what he liked and didn't like, and gave me a lot of useful information because I was spoiled and didn't want to risk having bad images in Bonaire. So I was playing with my camera while he was doing the tests on this one. So are there any questions?
So what's a good rig when you want to step up and you go above the go from the sea life to you said your big rig. What does that mean?
Okay, so my stepping stone, which only lasted a couple months, and there's a funny story there. So Robert Stansfield in Cozumel, who does the Blackwater dives, I loved his images, and I was shooting a little Nikon point and shoot, didn't even need a housing up to that point for 17 years. I just wanted to focus on my diving until I mastered that and I got bored with it. So I wanted to step it up. I said, Robert, I love your images. Will you take me as an apprentice? Will you teach me? And at that time, it was before his Blackwater venture. And he was like, yes, I'm interested in teaching classes. Come on down. I'll get you set up. What are you shooting? And I had just moved up to a Sony RX100 Mark VII, which is a $2,000 camera. Very nice camera. But he said, well, when you get a proper camera, let me know. So I've been a topside photographer for 30 years. I had all the lenses, which is a major expense for your camera. And I said, okay, I'm just going to bite the bullet and I'm going to get a mirrorless body, which I got the Canon R6. And I use all of my lenses, got the Nauticam before Nauticam raised their rates by 33% a couple of years ago. So I went ahead and bit the bullet with a mirrorless full frame camera. And I use interchangeable lenses. But when I go down on a macro shoot, you're shooting macro. You cannot zoom. You are stuck with it. So if that whale shark goes by, focus on that iris because you're getting a picture of his eye. And I've got a lot of great pictures of stingray eyes, turtle eyes, lots of eyes. But I base a lot of my dives on the visibility, on the conditions. So, I'll switch it out between them. But yeah, it's mirrorless is the way to go. There's the compact cameras. This is the one that I went up to, this little Sony, and it's smaller than the TG. And I have an iLight housing for it, and it was a great camera for a month that I shot before I got shamed into getting a proper camera. So, but Olympus has some great steps up in that line, and Sony.
I was lucky enough to dive with a guy from National Geographic, professional photographer on a dive, and his photographs, every one of them was so crisp and so we're in the blue hole. And he's taking pictures of 130 feet with very little light, and they all come out crystal clear. And it's like he's got this great big bubble lens on the front, and all these, and I'm thinking, well, A, how much does this thing cost? B, what is it? And how do you get proficient in doing this?
It's all lighting. The definition of photography is painting or making a picture with light. So all of that, and I've got my rig is about 30 grand, and with inflation and the prices now, it's ridiculous.
He told me 30 grand. This was almost 10 years ago.
And it's your child, it's your dive buddy. You cannot have a dive buddy and be responsible for anybody else's life. I have a solar certification, and if anyone's diving with me, they have to have a noisemaker because your life is right here, and that is it. So you need to be paired up with someone who understands that and can appreciate it and compliment it. A spotter. If you find a creature spotter, one of my kids loves to find things. So he's like, Mom, ting, 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 ting. Here's an octopus. I'm like, awesome, get out of the way. So knowing that and knowing that your life is consumed, your carry-on is consumed because you're not handing it off to the baggage handlers. You're gonna have to be carrying a 70-pound backpack and a roller with all your stuff because they won't insure it. You're on a dive boat and they don't have a dunk tank, and all you're concerned about is, where am I going to change my batteries? And I can't take it. It's it changes your diving experience. It's no longer about the dive. It's about the flexibility and if you can, and oh, don't bump me and I have to get in first and I have to get out last it changes your entire scuba experience. When you step it up from just something that you can put in
And
your PC.
I guess you just verified what I have felt for a long time is that, you know, I take a lot of pictures, right? And so my brain set is if I take 100 pictures, 2 of them are going to be amazing, right? And that's okay.
Yeah.
But if I want to go to like the National Geographic professional photography level, I'm going to have to change, like you said, my diving perspective, my enjoyment of the dive, what is my purpose to be in the water? And so the question is, do I want to do it, right?
Yes.
So that is
And I didn't do it for 17 years. I did it once I started getting bored diving. I was like, another dive, another crappy picture, whatever. And then, you know, I got my dive master. Okay, that'll go. Oh, and now I have this big thing to focus on. And I've got a lot of amazing pictures. So now when I see this great green moray eel, but it's not in the perfect spot with the perfect conditions, I'm like, I've already got a great picture of that. I'm going to pass. You go ahead. It's not right, or the current, or you get more picky. The longer you do it, it's like, it's not going to turn out. I'm not going to waste my time. And I went to a backscatter shootout a couple years ago in Bon Air, and there was a girl there, took some great pictures, in fact, award-winning in the competition. But she would go down, she wouldn't even look through the viewfinder and compose her image. She'd just shoot, spray and pray. Boom, 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 boom. It took her the entire night just to go through the images to find one that she could crop in on and, you know, find that would work. And I don't want to go through 5,000 images every night. It's like, I know after a certain while, you know, from experience, that's going to come out. That's not going to come out. I've seen it. I've reviewed my images. I don't just trash them. I keep even trash images from 20 years ago. I keep them and I look back on them and say, what went wrong there? Oh yeah. And I use that as a teaching tool. It's like, okay, your angle is from right here. Yeah, you got a great parrotfish, but you got his butt against the sand. It was overexposed. It was blurry. It was, so those type of things you look back on, and you know, who knows with AI, maybe I can go in a few years and say, okay, change the perspective on this parrotfish to be up here, and it'll fix it. But you know, so never throw anything away unless it's blurry, out of focus, you know, something like that. It just can't be fixed at this point in time. Who knows? Who knows what AI is going to do? So, anything else?
When you mentioned that it's only time that you flood like your rig, have you flooded a large, like one of your big rigs before? Does that happen to you?
Don't say it.
I am so OCD, and because I have jumped in without pins, without my mask, without my regular, I've done those things. And so with my camera, I am so meticulous. Whenever I get out from a dive, I'm working on my camera for the next dive. I don't wait. I don't go get a drink. I don't sit on the sun deck. I'm with the camera first thing. While my focus is there, before I'm rushed, before they're like, dive time, go, go, go. And then you're like, oh crap, grab it. And then you got a hair that you didn't see. It's like, take your time. That's why on these liveaboards, you'll see the photographers there. All they're doing is playing with the camera and making sure it's all right and all set up. I have not, but I got close with that hair. But I have, mine has a suction. You pull out air so that when you go down and it's losing that pressure, it's going to alert you before it's critical. When it happens, what you do, this is what I've been told. I haven't done it from experience. Thank God. Turn it off. Turn everything off, because the electronics are going to just be with water. It's going to exacerbate things. Turn everything off and turn your camera to where the port, what's going to flood first, is on the bottom side. You want the water to go in the bottom. So as you're making your controlled safety ascent, and if you're not doing a deco dive, go ahead and go without a 3-minute safety. Just go. No faster than your bubbles, but go. Hand it off and then figure it out later. But if that were ever to happen, number one, my camera model has been outdated. So my $5,000 camera housing would no longer work unless I can find that same model camera. So there's a whole lot more than just, oh, you flooded a camera. Well, no, you just lost about $30,000 unless you can get it fixed, because they don't make them anymore. So it's very take every precaution not for that.
That's the biggest fear ever.
And you
Yeah.
got quiet housing more than anything else, that's really.
So my, not a Canon. I shoot not a Canon. I had the Icolite with the Sony as my stepping stone, but not a cam. For me, what I've shot, their stuff, you open that thing up and it is an accordion of little fingers and controls that every single button on your camera, it's going to touch and you're going to have control with some knob or button, or it's a beautiful piece of craftsmanship that after having that, I could never shoot anything else. Unless somebody wants to give me something. But yes. Thank you. It's great. I had to rush myself because I could talk about each one of these slides for an hour apiece. So thank you for staying tuned and being patient with me. Okay, any questions online?
Could you show, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I was gonna show you, could you show me like exactly which website you use?
Okay, so I actually bought all of my stuff from Backscatter, and
Okay.
they are authorized sellers, as are many people,
Okay.
and even dive shops with Backscatter, and they're authorized sellers. And so anything that you buy from an authorized seller of Backscatter, they will give you the service, and you can call them up and ask them questions. They'll give you support for lifetimes of when you own it.
But
So
that was the correct brand.
yes, not against the housing that I use. Jennifer, good to meet you.
Thank you.